During this time of uncertainty, a lot of us have questions, everything ranging from stimulus checks to help for small businesses to how to put food on the table when you've lost your job. We are getting answers for you from Congressman French Hill, who is joining us now. Thank you so much, Congressman, for joining us.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So thousands of people across the state are filing for unemployment right now. Those who are self-employed or independent contractors, we're talking about gig workers, Uber drivers, they're being told right now to wait to file because the unemployment offices, they're still waiting on federal instruction and technical help. So what can these individuals do? When can they file, and what should they do until then in order to feed their families, take care of their families?
Right. Well, thanks, Laura. Important question, and Congress recognized that when we passed the CARES Act. For the first time ever, we made self-employed people, sole proprietors, independent contractors, and gig workers eligible for unemployment compensation benefits. And that's good, and we increased the amount of that unemployment compensation. But the challenge is none of our state systems in unemployment recognize that. So our states around the country are reprogramming their computers, and Mike Preston, who's our leader, the Secretary of Commerce, says it could be 2 or 3 weeks before he has the computers reprogrammed for those independent employees that need unemployment compensation. Good news is they will get the money backdated to when they left their job or closed their business. But the bad news is it's going to be a couple of more weeks before they can access it.
So what can they do in the meantime in order to do simple things like put food on the table?
Right. Well, fortunately, this is the week that the U.S. government, the Treasury Department, is going to issue tax rebates to all of our families, $1,200 per adult, $500 per dependent child. Those checks will go out early next week. If you have a direct deposit relationship with the IRS, where you've gotten a tax rebate before, you'll get this check direct deposited into your account. If you don't, the IRS is going to have a web portal up on Monday that will allow you to put in the information so they can direct deposit that money to your account. If for some reason you can't do that, the Treasury will mail you a check or send you essentially a card, a debit card with that amount of money on it for your use.
So that will provide a little bit of relief until we can get this system up and running.
Right.
Now, small businesses too are affected by this. What do you tell small business owners to do in order to keep their business afloat and most importantly help their employees? Right.
This is really important, and for the last 6 days the Treasury and the Small Business Administration have stood up the Paycheck Protection Program, and over 500,000 small businesses in America have already applied for one of those loans, and over $100 billion has been committed out of the $349 billion that Congress appropriated. The way a small business accesses that money is to go to their local bank, local credit union, or farm credit agency, and that's where they can apply for one of those loans. The money is specifically tailored to cover their payroll, pay their rent, pay their mortgage, pay their utilities for the next 8 weeks at the peak of this crisis.
Now, this is a loan, so will they have to pay this back unlike the stimulus check?
Yeah, good question. If you use the money for payroll and for those critical expenses for the 8 weeks, the loan will be converted into a grant and will be forgiven. The SBA will pay the bank off. So that's why it's a 2-page application. It's very straightforward, and it'll turn into about 8 weeks of operating capital for a small business that'll be forgiven. And if they need additional funds, they can have a little more than that. The bank will work with them and they'll be able to pay that out over time. But that core amount, that 8 weeks, will be forgiven and be treated as a grant for that small business.
Some of these small businesses have not had the money yet. A lot of banks still feel like they need some guidance on it. So is there anything that we can do to improve this process a little bit so that these small businesses can get the money?
Yeah, Laura, it's a good question. I've worked just night and day over the last 10 days working with the Small Business Administration and the SBA along with the Treasury to get the guidance these banks need. It's much better today, Friday, than it was a week ago on Friday when this program started. But it is amazing that we've stood up this program in less than a week and gotten 500,000 of these loans produced around the country. But banks are getting guidance every night, updated by the Treasury Department and the SBA to help them do a better job. But right now they can close these loans using their own loan documentation in the bank, and they are pretty good to go. There's still some technical issues to work out, but most banks are now closing these loans for our small businesses.
So we've heard about a Trump administration request for a quick approval for $250 billion in additional loans to help small businesses. But right now that's stalled. That was as of Thursday. So what is the status of that?
So Secretary Mnuchin and Mitch McConnell, the majority leader in the Senate, wanted to add $250 billion to that Paycheck Protection Program that we just talked about, because at the rate we're having applications for the money, it could run out at the end of next week or early the week following. So Mitch McConnell had a very clean $250 billion request. It was blocked yesterday by Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, saying he wanted to add money for hospitals and add money for additional SNAP benefits. Here's the issue with that, Laura. We have $120 billion in for hospitals in the CARES Act that we haven't even distributed yet. The first $30 billion of that's being distributed today by direct deposit to care providers around the country. And we extended the SNAP benefits, and both the states and the federal government have extended those, increased the benefit, and removed all the restrictions from it. So I think Mitch McConnell's view was those two requests from the Democrats in the Senate were premature, and yet the Paycheck Protection Program is essential right now to keep people employed and keep our small businesses functioning.
Is that something that you all would look at later on after all of this money has been paid out to see if we need additional funds?
Well, I feel that way generally about all the money in the CARES Act, that we ought to wait till early May and take a look and see all the investments that we've made and see if there are any gaps. But with this Paycheck Protection Program, we don't want that program to run out of funding at the end of next week or early the following week. So I support quick action by the Senate, followed by quick action in the House on this very narrow proposal. But on the balance of all the materials and strategies that we've put in place in CARES, I think we should wait till early May and see how the investments that we've made, how they've produced results out in the American countryside.
And what assistance is available for people who need help feeding their families right now?
This is a place, Laura, where we need to recruit volunteers too. We need volunteers in our community to help pack school lunches. The Congress approved the school lunch program continuing, and I'll tell you, Governor Hutchinson and the school districts here in Central Arkansas jumped on it, and they are offering meals for kids who should be in school right now to be able to take home. But we need volunteers to pack those lunches down at the Clinton Center. We really appreciate the Clinton Foundation offering that space. And we need our families, if they can, if they're able to volunteer and get contributions to our food banks. Congress also allocated more funding to our food banks so that we can support our families who are in this tough period in between paychecks.
Now let's talk about renters and homeowners. Some people are not able to pay their rent, not able to pay their mortgage because they're out of a job. So what help is available for them?
Congress in the CARES Act authorized deferrals for federal mortgages and also deferral for rent in federally supported multifamily housing units. So also a lot of banks in this country are sensitive to this, and they're deferring payments for people on their loans, on their credit cards, on their mortgage payments. And I really encourage families to contact their landlord or contact their banker about the deferral for at least 60 days or so that we can get through killing this virus and get our economy back to work and get our families back earning a paycheck.
Speaking of that, we did a poll and more than 80% of viewers think that it's still too early to think about reopening businesses. So I'm curious what you think about this.
Yeah, Laura, this is a great question. And this is what everybody in the country is talking about. We've had terrific public health leadership across the country in fighting the virus, looking for a therapeutic, developing a vaccine. We've had great leadership here in the state with Nate Smith and Cam Patterson and Asa Hutchison leading the public health effort. But now it is time to slowly think about how would we bring back the country to full employment over the next few weeks, and when should we start, and what should be the characteristics that we all follow. So the Center for Disease Control is working on this, the CDC, Dr. Fauci at the NIH, all will be providing guidance on us on how can we, once the pandemic peaks and begins to tail off, how can we all go back to work safely? How can we all go back to more positive thoughts about how we want to spend our time rather than being in our homes? So it's an important topic. It'll be a national conversation, but I believe we can do it, and we'll do it safely, and we'll get the confidence that they can get back out and get back to work.
One question from a viewer is this: for the people who owed taxes instead of getting a refund this year, how will the stimulus checks affect next year?
Right, good question. You still will get an economic check from the Treasury, a tax rebate from the Treasury. If you owe money for 2019, that payment is now not due until July 15th. It's been deferred from April 15th next week. So if you owe money from 2019 taxes, your payment's deferred until July 15th, and you'll still get one of these tax rebate checks here in the next few days.
Okay, and our second question from a viewer is, will parents of college students or will the students themselves receive stimulus money if they filed taxes on their own?
The parents will get their $1,200. Kids over 17 that are not dependents on their parents' tax return are a gap in this program. So someone in college is not going to get a check like their parents would. So it's a gap in the program. I'm not sure Congress anticipated that when they were drafting it, but that's the state right now.
Okay, and Congressman, is there anything else, maybe a popular question that you're getting frequently asked that you think that we should address?
Well, a lot of retirees that are on Social Security have asked me, will they get a tax rebate check? And the answer to that question is yes, and you'll get that even though you're not working. That was a question that we've gotten a tremendous amount from a lot of our older senior citizens.